Welcome back to the Patriot Sentinel. I'm Rashard Tortorello, and my co-host tonight, Cam and Carrie Rails. How you guys doing tonight?
Good, good.
How you
Living the
guys
dream.
surviving? Are we surviving Snowmageddon?
Oh yeah.
It was chilly. Too chilly for me.
Too chilly for you. What did you guys do this weekend?
Dude, we cuddled. We were watching movies. We were watching Home Alone. You know, when I
Oh,
went outside, I looked like the bird lady from Home Alone 2. So I had a good time. You know, built snowmans. Oh man, it was good. It was a good Christmas. I mean, January, yeah, you know what I'm talking about. Yeah, sure.
right.
Well, we got a good show tonight for our audience. The battle for the borders in Minnesota and the trap for voters here in Oklahoma. Um, they are suing, are you guys paying attention, to stop federal agents from doing their jobs in the North. And they're signing petitions to rig elections in the South. So we have a packed briefing today. First, we go to Minnesota, where Operation Metro Surge has turned into a constitutional crisis. Local leaders aren't just complaining about ICE, they're actively suing to kick them out. Cam and Carrie, we're on the national security desk, and I want you guys to explain what's happening in Minneapolis. But before we do that, I'd like to bring in a special guest tonight, our good friend Moto. Moto, are you there with us?
I'm here,
There he
sir.
is.
Thank you for having me.
Hey, hey.
So, Moto, thank you for being on the show. We had talked yesterday about your position about what's happening in Minnesota, Minneapolis. So, can you go ahead and tell us what your position is?
Absolutely. I want to lead off with three things. My first position is that you're doing a great job with the Patriot Sentinel. The show looks great, and you guys have been covering some good stuff. So thank you for all the excellent content. The second thing I want to lead off with is prefacing this for any of your audience that does not know Moto. You have all been familiar with me and shared many rooms with me over the last many years, and I think you can all attest that this may be one of the only times you've ever seen me without my red "Make America Great Again" hat on. Would that be fair?
Absolutely.
Yes, absolutely.
100%.
For the last
100%.
5 or 6 years, there have rarely been other ground troops out here that have worn that hat in as many places and climes as I have. So I am Make America Great Again. I am a President Trump supporter. I am America First. I'm a veteran. I'm a taxpayer. I'm a father. I'm a brother. I'm a friend to everyone here. So I am a patriot, and anybody that does not know me has probably not been in the trenches with us these last couple of years. The third thing that I want to lead off with is the video footage that's behind me. So for anyone that has not seen the video footage of Alex Preddy's encounter with DHS agents previous to the fatal encounter that we're all now talking about, this is something that I want to backdrop our conversation with, because I think that Alex Preddy was lucky to walk away from this encounter with law enforcement. And I think he was also lucky to walk away alive. So this is Alex. He is spitting at officers, and now he is going to commit damage to federal property. Some of you know I'm in the auto repair business. That's about an $800 taillight right there that the taxpayers can pay for. But Alex is taken down by these agents. It's unclear to me whether these are ICE agents or Border Patrol agents, as in the fatal encounter. We know that it was actually Customs and Border Patrol agents working under DHICE as part of this operation. But I want to point something out to both sides about this encounter. This is a justifiable moment for Alex to be arrested, to be detained. He is carrying in this footage as well. So I'm very surprised that he was not shot, but he was not shot during this encounter. Okay. These agents take him down. They are wrestling with him. It's clear that he is wearing a firearm on his hip. One of these agents makes the decision that it is not a good idea for this federal force to be this close to citizens without really, really good reason. So they're actually going to let him go. You'll watch. See that? They let him go. He was picked up in an armbar, and the agent sent him away and handed him his jacket from the ground that he had dropped. So he continues to jaw jacket law enforcement. This guy says, we all need to be in our vehicles and we need to get out of here. because everyone can barely stand in the first place. There's nothing but ice all over the place here. That is dangerous for these civilians, but it's also dangerous for our agents and our law enforcement professionals. That makes them very vulnerable. So I imagine that some of the policies and protocols that have led to so much ground foot activity for these agents is being reviewed. But this is an opportunity for both sides to say, yes, you can carry a firearm and even get into a tense interaction with law enforcement and you cannot be shot. And the left needs to realize that these agents, with every excuse, he had escaped their clutches and had been violently assaulting their vehicles. They chose not to shoot him and even let him go and gave him his jacket back. Now, backdropped by that and admitting that this is crime and that this is somebody who is engaging in very foolish and illegal activities, probably as part of a funded, coordinated insurrection operation from the other side, knowing or unknowing. You know, I'm Jewish, but I know a very popular saying is, forgive them, Father, for they know not what they do. So whether Alex knew that he was working for George Soros and elite globalists, I don't know, but that is probably what is happening here. On to some footage from the fatal encounter with Alex Preddy that we are all now taking so much time to review. And I think it's sad, and we should never have American civilian lives coming down to pixels in situations like this. But the part that I want to point out in this video footage, if I was just reviewing this moment by moment and I did not know that this was going to end in a fatal encounter, I would be asking why the area is not clearly marked. There is not anything that makes this an obvious law enforcement scene or operation. The vehicles are unmarked. The officers, to my knowledge, are not identifying themselves or presenting badges or anything. Alex is flagging vehicles through the street, so he's clearly acting at least reasonable, much more reasonably than kicking out taillights on law enforcement vehicles. This right here, this maneuver is not something that I am familiar with in law enforcement regularly. I am not used to seeing this level of physical contact between law enforcement professionals and citizens for any purpose other than being detained or arrested. Shoving women on ice in the streets is not what I consider a normal law enforcement maneuver, and it looks like escalation to me. Now, I haven't prepared any footage of what happened after this because we all know exactly what happened after this. I do believe that the shooting can be considered justifiable. He was wearing a weapon. It's very hard to tell that the other officer had disarmed him, and I'm sure they were repeating gun, 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 something, something, something. Alex had a phone in his hand, reach for his hip. It is a very tough job that these agents are doing, but somebody that is in charge of their policies and procedures does not have this scene well cordoned off. This agent is doing something that I am uncomfortable with. This is a masked federal agent shoving and another one eventually shooting American citizens in American cities. Justified or not, it is our responsibility to mitigate the opportunity for things like this to happen. And in the Renee Good situation, very unfortunate also. The most tragic thing is I think this is truly just Americans afraid of other Americans. This is agents afraid of civilians and civilians afraid of agents, justifiably or not. And we need to address that. So in the Renee Good situation, it is very clear her vehicle is oriented at that officer. The wheels are spinning out. But again, the same environmental hazard. The officer was standing on ice and did not have the footing in order to sprawl, maneuver, move. That is making all of these officers more tense and more vulnerable, and it is making the civilians in the city. Because the next thing that happens here is this clown skit fumble wrestling match as Alex Preddy is trying to cover this woman. And I think the mishandling of the narrative, as much as the policies and procedures that have led to these situations, is the reason why my president, President Trump, humanely, quickly, and I believe in a very good move, made some personnel changes in this area of operation. When he said, I am sending Tom Homan and he is going to report directly to me, that gave me some peace of mind, and I understood that he is taking this situation seriously, justifiable or not. It is a tragedy, and this is too many civilian deaths. That's the last thing. I want to end on this, and then I will let you guys go ahead and field some questions for me.
Carrie,
Do you guys know what the casualty count for DHS officers in Minneapolis or in Minnesota even for the last 6 months is?
no. What is it?
How many agents have been killed?
I'd say none right now.
It is 0. It is literally 0. And that is mostly nationwide also, by the way. So why we have Border Patrol agents in Minnesota, that's all very weird to begin with. But from an operational standpoint, especially as a commander, you have to tell your troops, like, guys, we are not being shot at here. In fact, the only serious injury that I can find record of so far is part of a finger got bit off. And that was recent. And so the just reality is that from a law enforcement standpoint, from a moral, from a preservation of our republic standpoint, there's no casualties on the state side, and now we have 2 civilian casualties. It is time for a pause and time to reassess. So I'm glad that President Trump is doing that, and I just think it's so important that even the most hardened of patriots be intellectually honest about what we are seeing and what we are dealing with, and the fact that the truth is these are masked federal agents in our city streets. So I'm very suspicious of that, no matter who the president is.
All right, good point. Carrie, you have a question?
Mo, how do you feel? Part of me feels like this was a ticking time bomb. We have state leaders that are inciting violence and are inciting riots and saying fight against the federal government. Don't you feel at some point when they ask for the violence and then someone on their side dies, aren't they culpable for that person, that human life?
Absolutely. That's absolutely correct. And I don't know why we are keeping the gloves on with these insurrectionist local and state officials. If they are keeping local law enforcement agencies from supporting these operations so that all the cogs in the wheel of these agencies and the reason we have them compartmentalized to their various responsibilities cannot function, arrest them, charge them with insurrection, charge them with the fraud that they are responsible for, and charge them as accomplices in these fatalities.
Good point. Cam?
Moto, let me ask you, where is the local law enforcement to help these guys? Like, is there state troopers helping them, the local police? What's going on?
State police under the purview of the governor, local police under the purview of the mayor. I understand that their leadership is keeping them off of the field when they want to be supporting these agents. The law enforcement agency that I don't see here that does have the autonomy, that is the most supreme law enforcement officer in each one of these counties is these local sheriffs. Where is the sheriff's department? They do not have to have permission from the governor. They do not have to have permission from the mayor. The sheriff here should be deploying his deputies in order to make sure that these operations are successful. But let's also not kid ourselves. Even though this was a violent offender with a bad record, this was happening at a donut shop. This was not a human trafficking den sting, and it does not need to be happening in a time whenever it's it's so inclement you can't even walk around on the streets. So if these guys are out of their vehicles, they need to have a very, very real and clear reason, and it needs to be for as short a time as possible. And they definitely don't need to be. Go ahead.
Moto, we have a question from an audience. He says, perhaps the agents are masked to protect themselves from being doxxed. And that's a real good question because
absolutely they are. I understand and I agree with
unlike
that.
Unlike law enforcement, police, these ICE officers have been doxxed and have been targeted for online assassination. And so is it unreasonable to say you have to go into the situation unmasked for the entire world to see you to have your family targeted? So how do you balance the need for law enforcement, for ICE to do their jobs, and for the public to feel that they are being listened to, I guess, for the better word?
I totally understand this, and it's unfortunate. It's a dynamic part of this situation and this very charged climate that we are in. But how often have you seen me wear a mask in the last 6 years, Rashar? And
I
I
have
was
never seen you
very
wear a
vocal.
mask.
I was on the east side of Oklahoma City. I was in these neighborhoods. I was going to these liberal events, and I have been split open in the streets, as a matter of fact, under a pile of peaceful protesters, as they were even called by David Holt. And I had to protect myself, produce a firearm, and I did not shoot anyone. But here is my answer on that. Doxing and putting the lives of federal agents in jeopardy is a crime. So find and prosecute those people to the maximum extent of the law, because the irony of having masked, unidentified agents and unmarked cars sweeping the nation to identify people, that is something that gives too much credence to the argument of the other side. These law enforcement officers need to understand that these are risks for them, their families. They need to be prepared at all times, and we need to pay them accordingly so that they can live in places where they are together and safe and have the personal PPE and the personal equipment that they need. But also, we will put them in a much worse position if our reasonable citizens do not feel like we still have objective opinions about law enforcement. So as
Absolutely.
patriots, we have got to be fair about situations like this, even more fair than the other side. So it's a tough issue on the doxing, and it is a tough issue on masking your identity. But that's another thing. Oklahoma is not an ID state. If I am not driving a vehicle and not committing a crime, and there's no reasonable suspicion, if a police officer asks me for my ID, I do not have to produce that. That is not the case in Minnesota. You are required to identify yourself for law enforcement in Minnesota. So for me, the first step in this fatal situation
Muto?
occurring in order to test your that you are contending with is asking for identification. This officer is shoving these people around and not asking them to produce their identification, because if this woman in the white jacket is willing to stop, ruffle through her wallet and produce her ID for this agent, then they are clearly still being compliant enough and have her identification at that point. If she does something illegal and meaningfully impedes the investigation, you have her identity at that point. So that, I think, is some of what we will see. And again, I don't think a lot of are calling it a surrender from President Trump to dial back this operation.
And
but I
Muto,
just
we're going
think
to have
it's
to leave
savvy,
it
and
at
I think
that.
it's necessary.
Yeah, we're gonna have to leave it at that. We're going on to the next segment, but thank you for coming on and sharing that this
Thanks,
commentary
guys.
and your reporting. I appreciate you, bro.
Adios.
You know, Minnesota is a time bomb. So both sides, and he's MAGA. So he's coming from where Trump is coming from. We don't agree all the time, but we do agree 99% of the time. But in Minnesota, it's a hard call because, how do you deal with the governor and mayors and local politicians who are not cooperating with federal law enforcement? And that is the entire reason we are there. Is Trump went in with this surge project to rid the state and the country of illegals. 80 million people voted for him to do this. The only ones that do not agree with this and have not realized that they can fight this in the ballot box in 2026 and 27 and 28. They're not waiting for that. This is the true insurrection. So when we talk about insurrection going back to January 6th, that wasn't an insurrection. That was just a protest that got out of hand. And, even the stories as more light is being shed on January 6th, Cam, we know that it was all a big setup. But the men and women of ICE, they are federal law enforcement agents, and they are supposed to be afforded the protection and the respect of local law enforcement. So when you have local law enforcement that is told to stand down by the local leadership here, what the hell are they supposed to do, Cam? What are they supposed to do if they can't do their job and have no top cover from local law enforcement?
See, to me, to Moto's point, this sheriff is an elected official. Is he a constitutional sheriff? If not, then why is this guy being elected, right? If so, then why is he hesitating? Well, how come he is not the phase of the community? Because that's what he got elected for. The sheriff should be there speaking about this.
They've
He
had
is
a
the
big
police chief.
presence in there, big time. I used to work for a company in Maple Plains, Minnesota, and I'd have to go up there a couple times a year and stay in Minneapolis before 2020 and after 2020. And seeing the devastation is very similar to LA, San Francisco, Seattle. It slowly started invading. There is a division between St. Paul and Minneapolis. The ones that are not okay with turning it into a sanctuary city are on St. Paul. Totally different place. Where Minneapolis has turned into a community where the old money areas are filled with 24 people in one house that can't afford to keep the roof up, keep the home up. They don't, it's a different city. It has been destroyed. And so the people that are electing are the people that want the destruction and want all this free and crazy stuff. And so it's changed the voting body of that district in Minnesota. By all means, that's not the majority of Minnesotans at all. I know so many that live there and they're conservative, they're really good people, but in this area it is just turned into a voter pool of liberal mess.
Well, that's true. Let's go back to Cam. Cam, he's the police chief, not the sheriff. And so we don't know who the sheriff is in that county, and we need to find out who it is and see what their thoughts and opinions are. But Kara, you are right. The state of Minnesota, two different cities, two different wants and needs. But with Trump flooding the zone with ICE and DHS agents because local prosecutors refuse to do the job, the problem that we're seeing again, that the Democrat machine is fighting back. Attorney General Keith Ellison, along with the cities, with Minneapolis and St. Paul, they filed that lawsuit back on January 12th to stop the operation. I mean, they literally asked the judge to issue a restraining order against the federal government. And, Carrie, how ridiculous is it for the state of Minnesota to issue a restraining order against ICE? On what legal grounds do they have to do this? And what about federal supremacy? So do they have legal ground to ask ICE to stand down? I don't think so.
No, in my rudimentary opinion, I would say no, that's insurrection and complete defiance of our federal orders.
Cam, Ellison, he's arguing his argument for this. I mean, he's totally retarded. The guy's been a retard, at the Capitol too as well. A retard. That enforcing immigration law violates the 10th Amendment and state sovereignty. They claim that because they have sanctuary laws and that the federal government can't come in and disrupt their local resources. And I'm using air quotes like a 16-year-old. So essentially, Cam, they believe that the city ordinance should veto federal law.
It's not how chain of command works.
Do they not understand how the chain of command works? You cannot state veto law enforcement at the federal level.
Well, they know. And that's the reason why they're doing this, because they're focusing on the uninformed voter, the uninformed person who just goes to work and just watches the news. So, of course, this is going to be something reactive. if I bet you Trump just stops all federal funding to uh, the whole entire state, I bet you $100 they'll start getting things squared away really quick because they depend on the federal funding. You know, the roads, the bridges, the taxes, everything. They depend on the federal government. And at the end of the day, unfortunately, whether they like it or not, Trump is the main administrator. He's the executive director of our nation, and he has overall say over the governor, over the mayor, over everything. Now, when you're talking about the Constitution, it applies to citizens.
You know, the media is always painting this as agents running wild. And I'm kind of rooting for him when he's having his press conferences and he's talking down to some of the journalists. I wouldn't call them journalists, but maybe Democrat spokesmen and spokespeople. But he's got a point. You know, they're not discussing the hostility against the administration and these ICE agents. These agents, again, are operating in a zone where local police have been told to stand down or actively obstruct them. And when you have that level of resistance, tragic happens. I mean, what were they not surprised to see with Alex, Freddie, and Renee Good? With all the rhetoric at the highest level of government in Minnesota, when their job is to bring it down and work with the federal government, they are escalating. But you know, Trump, man, this dude is not even blinking. You know, he just called Tom Holman up and said, hey, you know, I need you to head down to Minnesota. And that's exactly what he's doing. You know, these folks have to understand that Minneapolis is not a separate country. It's American soil, and the law applies. Let's pivot down to Oklahoma and State Question 836. Monday, Oklahoma United dropped off 42 boxes of petitions, nearly 200,000 signatures to put State Question 836 on the ballot. Now, to the average listener, well, I wouldn't call our listeners average. I mean, they are pretty much tuned into what's going on. But for those that find this on you know, through their search on YouTube or Facebook, you know, open primary sounds friendly, you know, but we're calling it a trap. You know, Carrie, fairness is just the marketing word they use to sell a rigged system. You know, State Question 836 creates a top two primary or a jungle primary. Instead of Republicans picking Republicans and Democrats picking Democrats, everybody runs on the same ballots, and the top two advance to the next general election, regardless of who's going there. Do you still think that this is the right path, Carrie, for Oklahoma?
Yeah, I don't. I'm no for 836, and the reason for me is I don't want to end up with two liberals in the primary, two Democrats. That would be bad for Oklahoma. I don't think the verbiage way they have it written was very confusing. Is it a jungle primary? Is it an open primary? They're different. And it took you explaining, no, it's one or the other. And I'll let you do that again real quick so the listeners understand the difference and that spin selling doesn't happen to them.
You know, Cam, the Democrats dropped the ball last year when they failed to get in the petition or the filing requirements to allow independents to participate in the Democrat primaries for 2026 and 2027. And so their argument for 836 for the pro, does it help their side when they purposely, I use that in quotes too as well, because I don't think the Democrat Party is disorganized. I think it was a tactic, and to be honest, I would have done the same thing too, to get nearly 480,000 independent voters all pissed off to go and find the petition and sign it. Do you think that was a made-up situation to provoke anger on the independent side? A sympathetic argument, maybe?
Well, of course. Think about it. The number one thing they're going to do is they're going to pull your strings to see how reactive you are. And they're going to say, hey, these guys are preventing you from voting in the primaries. So how about this? Let's even out the whole thing and let's bring the best candidates and let's see if they're going to be a great representation for your voting bloc, which is completely wrong. It creates a watered down representation of the population, and there's not going to we're not going to have somebody who's going to represent us, and that's where elite capture comes in. Elite capture is going to come in with billions and millions of dollars from the super PACs, and then your grassroots trying to find, for example, like Kerry to run for office, and she doesn't have that kind of money because we're
That's
talking about $800 million,
Right.
and I only have $80 to give her. So I'm sorry, Carrie. It seems like these guys are gonna not represent us, and they're just gonna have their own. But again, money and power by political action. That's what they're gonna do. And
yep.
Rashard, hey, to
Yep.
Carrie's point, can you explain to us the difference between jungle primaries and open primaries? I think Carrie was asking if you could explain that for us.
So the petitioners, when they filed the petition for 836, they listed the petition for open primaries. And what an open primary is that if the state was to adopt an open primary system, now there are different types of open primaries, but I think what they were trying to promote was, I would say, the good open primary, where on primary day in June, a Democrat can come over and participate in a Republican primary. So in other words here, the governor's race, we have 6 Republicans running, and our system is it's open, and a Democrat or an independent can come over and vote in our Republican primary for a Republican candidate, but they can't vote twice. That means they can't go back and vote for the Democrat candidate for governor. It's a one and done. That's an open primary that I think they were selling. But if you look at the ballot language is the definition of a jungle primary. And a jungle primary is that all candidates for an office are all on the same ballot. Now, the problem that creates is that the reason we have a closed primary in the Republican Party is that we want Republicans. Look, we have six Republicans running for governor, right? And if we had a jungle primary, which is an open primary, but it's a jungle primary version, we would have everybody, including Cindy Munson, on the ballot. Now, you know the Democrats and independents are going to pick Cindy Munson, and everybody else on the Republican side, they're going to choose their favorite candidate, from Gentner Drummond to Mike Mazzei, to Chip Keating, to Charles McCall, and I think there are 2 other people running and a couple of independents. And that vote will be split. The reason we want to maintain closed primaries is that we want to pick the best of the best to represent us. This jungle primary scheme does not allow us to pick the best of the best. It allows Democrats and independents to influence our primary. This is why we need to fight this, and need to fight this hard. We need to keep our primary closed. Now, you can say why Democrats have an open primary, because I don't think anybody gives a shit about the Democrats, but it's they just don't care too much about the Democrats. But it's a dangerous thing because it allows Democrats to hijack the Republican races. In a red state like Oklahoma, Democrats know they can't win in a general election. So under this system, and why we say it's rigged, they will cross over and make the primary their general election. That's exactly what it is. They've switched it. It's happening in California. Primarily supermajority Democrat voters. How many Republican representatives do we have and senators in California? We don't. Now, they can roll the dice, and it might happen here where they don't have any representation, but because we have so many people running for governor, it doesn't work here in Oklahoma. And when they cross over a mass vote for the squeamish, most liberal Republican on the ballot, we'll end up with California-type Republicans. And you end up with 2 Republicans in a general election. Could one be the real conservative, and could the other one be a Democrat in disguise? And guess who wins all the time? And so what this is, I think, in essence, is that a jungle primary, because they can't win in the general election, and why we say it's rigged is because they will have the power to make that choice for us in the primaries. And that's why they want this. So, we saw Kyle, Speaker of the House, Hilbert, and the majority of the GOP leadership signed a letter calling this a backdoor for liberals. But is this, Cam, a little too late? I mean, they came out like
This should have
the
been
week
done.
before. They dropped the before they stopped the petition and the signature gathering. Should they not have come out like back in last year in the summertime?
I'm gonna quote this wise man that told me this morning. They should have come out in May of last year when this was talks, and it should have came from from our state legislators, our Republicans, to our GOP, state GOP, county GOPs, local or precincts. It should have been a movement where, again, representation comes about. Hey, we want to take care of our party, and now we come out when they turn in almost 200,000 signatures. Come on, dude, too late. It's too late.
Yes,
And
I
and
know.
and,
That's what happens
and
when you worry about silly censures and not the big picture of running a business, which is a party.
well, the business of the GOP and the business of the Republican Party is to conduct the business of the party, and that's that should be the focus of what they're doing. But Carrie, there is a guy by the name of Steve Fair. I'm not sure if you know who he is. Cam, do you know Steve Fair?
Sounds
Well, he's
familiar.
a prominent, yeah, he's a prominent party committee member, and he called it a scheme to move Oklahoma to the left. So we all know that if State Question 836 passes, the Republican platform effectively becomes meaningless because the voters deciding who the nominee is aren't necessarily Republicans anymore. And I can't stress that enough. We have to just hammer this away. It turns every election into a popularity contest based on name recognition rather than principles. Now, Carrie, do you agree with that?
On name recognition versus principles, absolutely. I feel like we do need to get to a place in both sides of the aisle where you're not voting for a mascot, you're voting for a person that stands up and says, this is what I'm going to do, and this is my plan, and this is why I'm a great person. I've heard all these terms thrown around that are really meaningless, like grassroots. It could be a great thing, right? You're a small business like my dad that started in our home in 1992, to Jim Jones, who made everyone drink the Kool-Aid. That was a grassroots movement, right? To use terms instead of saying, I'm going to do this, and this is the problem, and here's my plan to solve it. I'm the most conservative because I'm grassroots. That's meaningless. People need to start saying what they stand for and not hide behind a mascot. This is more important than Bedlam rivalry.
No, I agree with you. I think they will make the signatures. I don't think there's going to be a lot of fraud. I think the Republican Party is hoping that that some of the signatures may be tossed out. I think they're too smart to do that. So I think the majority of the signatures will be passed through. And how the process works is that they scan all the sheets and they use OCR to look at the signatures and verify those names with the voter database. The other problem I see is that when was the last time that the state of Oklahoma purged their database of dead voters, people who've moved out of state? I mean, so I'm not saying that it's ripe with fraud.
This last campaign didn't Stitt remove a whole bunch of people?
State
He moved a lot, but I think a lot more needs to be
2023.
done. Yeah, I think it was 23 or 24, but he did remove a lot. But I think
Yeah.
more can be done. But the process is that once they get the signatures, they digitize it, and then they compare it to the voter rolls, and then those signatures that may be in question goes to another office or another individual, and they actually look at that name and do a manual verification. So they needed 172,000 signatures. They got over 200 signatures, 200,000 signatures. So I don't think it will be tossed out based on that. And so we'll have to see what happens after the verification process. I know there are some other groups out there working hard and coming together to bring awareness to the state of Oklahoma, and deciding what to do forward. The state will have to work together on that. But we do know that as it stands now, this is a threat to the way we do and conduct business as a party, and that's the focus we have to maintain. Because if we don't keep the eye on the ball, I mean, I think we're famous with chewing gum and walking at the same time. Is that after 2 election cycles after this passes, I think the Republican Party and the supermajority we enjoy in the state of Oklahoma may be a thing of the past. Cam, what do you think?
Well, okay, so there is a silver lining, worst case scenario. Let's say it passes and, open primaries happen. Louisiana, the state of Louisiana, had kind of the same thing, but it was their jungle primaries. And finally, this year, they started changing everything back to start to have what they used to have, party platforms separate from open primaries. So there is a silver lining out there. But when you look at Washington and California, and we as California say, Californians, oh my God, we as Oklahomans say, don't California my Oklahoma.
Hmm.
It's just one state out of 3 that has had some kind of open primaries. So I'm crossing my fingers. I'm wishing to everything I can, counting my blessings to make sure that this doesn't happen. But we got too many signatures, unfortunately.
Well, we'll see. Sarah posted that keeping the parties closed may have made sense back when we can all agree on basic truths. But now we
Yeah.
have people who don't share in the basic truths. I think that's what she meant to say, Carrie. I believe she's right. When we can
Yeah.
all agree on the same thing, then it made sense. But I'm not sure if she's a proponent of
Well, and
836
that's where I
or
was
not.
confused at first because leadership didn't have the right people delivering the message, and I felt like to be to be anti or say no to 836, that meant you could just put on your mascot costume and continue saying I'm the most conservative and win a race. And that's the way they had presented it until you and Rachel Ackerman sat me down and presented it with, no, this is what's going on. And we very likely could end up with 2 Democrats in the primary or even 2 conservatives. And I don't think the Democrats would like that either, even though we would. They wouldn't like that. And so out of fairness, either side, that's wrong. But how do we force our candidates to say, this is who I am, this is what I stand for, I hear your problems, and here's my plan to fix it? We have to force the candidates to do that. There's no party. The party loves these people to hide behind the mascot and say no more, drink the Kool-Aid. No, we the voters have to make those candidates come forward and ask them those questions and demand answers, or else we're allowing them to stay complacent and hide in that mascot costume.
I agree with you. I want to correct something too. It was me who explained all this to Rachel Lee Ackerman, who explained it to you. So
I know. That's why, like, between the 2 of you, I was like, okay, this is making a lot more sense. I'm understanding this now.
So you had to hear from a chick besides a dude before you
I did.
totally understood it. So even though I educated her on 836 as well, and so she was basically saying what I was telling you.
Yes, absolutely.
I know where we rank, but anyway, so
well, I wouldn't have asked her if you wouldn't have mentioned it.
I have all the text receipts, but Cam, Carrie, this has been a good conversation tonight. You guys have the last word. What's on your mind, Carrie?
No, I'm just grateful to be on the podcast and be able to share this information with everybody.
We have to hire someone to do the production. This is really grueling, so we can focus on the content. So if you know anybody who needs a part-time job, we need an intern. I think what we need is a Turning Point USA college kid who likes tech.
Yeah, bring them home.
Cam, how's your lovely family? You got a baby on the way. Have you talked to Victoria Woods about setting up a fund for you, for your escape sometimes to your man cave?
Oh, goodness.
As well as for your family too.
No, it's all about the man cave. Come on, man. Let's be honest. No,
Priorities.
so I do need to talk to Victoria, and I need her to look at my spreadsheet And I want her to be completely honest, because if Oklahoma becomes the next California, I got to be prepared financially, because the middle class is going to be taken out. So I need Victoria to give me wisdom and invest in the correct thing. So by the time 836 is full throttle, I'm able to afford Oklahoma.
I think you will, no matter what happens. Is just make sure that we fight to keep the Republican Party in a close primary situation. But as far as standard of living, there was a poll that was released, and I'll get it on next week's show, that Americans, wages are going up, prices are coming down, and look at gasoline. The price of eggs is still, I think, are pretty inexpensive, and it's coming down too as well. And so things are always looking up for the American people. I just wish the Democrats would stop and put their swords down and work together with us, instead of fighting us. And this is the problem with the Democrat Party. I have a lot of Democrat friends. I like them, but their party sucks, and it's been infiltrated by the George Soros types, the communists, the Marxists. And as of today, I don't hear any local Democrat condemning what's happening in Minnesota. They're either supporting it or remaining silent. And unfortunately, in those districts that have the Democrat representatives, they'll continue to win their seats. But I wonder, Cam, before we sign off, is that going to change now that Donald Trump is in the beginning of a second term, starting this week? Will that change going into the midterms, when Democrats might be losing races because of what they're supporting and not doing what's best for their constituents?
Yeah, look at the Democrat Party. If you look at their principles, what they have done from the time it became a party where slavery was a thing, where Jim Crow laws was a thing, where they were against the Bill of Rights, when they didn't want to march with Martin Luther King. When we're talking about the Democrat Party, they haven't really stood up for the principles and values that the people have. The Republican Party has forward towards helping the population. And I will say, when I look at my gas price, when I look at my grocery list, and my groceries not that expensive, I start thinking Trump, 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 Trump. So it was gonna happen. It's gonna happen.
Well, that's it for tonight. Thank you, Cam. Thank you, Carrie. Thank you for our viewers. So we'll see you guys next week. Hey, and
Have a
thanks
good.
to Moto too, for coming
Yeah.
on, being a stand-up guy. So we appreciate your reporting, Moto. Thanks. Bye.
Mhm.